Hello and welcome to Pearlie's Design Shop. I'm Shirley, and I've had a few requests asking if I could demonstrate how I dye my papers. So today I'm going to show you how I do that with acrylic ink. Now the acrylic ink that I have on hand is by Liquitex, and my go-to colors are transparent burnt umber, carbon black, and transparent raw sienna. Now the fourth color that I'll use today is called transparent burnt sienna, and I do use that sparingly because it's quite red, so you don't need very much of that. Now when I am dyeing my papers with acrylic ink or anything else, I usually wear gloves because the dye can leave your hands quite stained. I also have a table in my basement I'm working on. It's just a long work table. I cover it with plastic so you can see that poly. And there's my water bottle. That's my other ingredient. So I just have a spray bottle filled with water. The lighting down here is not great, so I apologize for any glare and shadows. So I'm going to start with some white cardstock. This is very inexpensive, not a brand name. And I spray it both sides down with water, so give it a good soaking. And then I will start adding the ink. So I'm going to add a little more water here, make a bit of a puddle for the ink to set on, and you'll see a pretty cool effect happening. And that, if that's what you want, leave it like that. But I'm going to continue on to show you how I add more colors, more ink, more water, and we'll see what happens with that. And this is the technique that I use to get the kind of grungy look that I think everyone was asking about. All right, so I almost always use a hit of black on the paper in my dyeing process. So I'm just going to lay another sheet of that inexpensive white cardstock on top of the first page and give it a spritz of water. There's lots of liquid and moisture underneath. That paper is going to start to absorb and soak up. And just repeat the process of adding more ink, spraying with more water. This is really just an experiment. Try it and see the results you get. You may want to stop at a certain point and let the page dry and see what the result is. And you can always add more after the paper has dried. So far, this is the result we're getting as I flip those pages over and let them soak up the ink and water from underneath. And these pages could be let to dry just the way they are and have really interesting results. But I'm going to keep going here and show you what happens when the colors blend a little bit more and they're not as, they don't stand out as much. They get really grungy looking. So you can add as much or as little ink, as much water as you want. It's all trial and error till you get the feel of it. Feel free to just practice away, even on scrap pieces of paper. And you will get different results depending on the amount of ink and water and the type of paper that you're using. So as I am happy with each page, I just set it aside, and I let them dry overnight. They could be dry in about 6 hours probably, depending on the room. In the basement we do have a fan and a dehumidifier, but I still leave them overnight. So here I'm just adding a little more ink. And because my table is covered in plastic, it's just collecting all that excess ink and water. So I've just introduced some of that transparent burnt sienna. You can see how much more red it is, and when it mixes you almost get kind of a yellowy red, orangey effect. There's also a lot of bubbles forming. You really won't see those once the pages have dried. The paper will have absorbed all of that liquid. So now I'm going to ink up some brown paper bag. I've just torn it into pieces. I'm wetting it down with some water from my spray bottle and just letting it soak up some of that ink that's already on the table. I'm going to do the same thing with the brown paper bag as I did with the white cardstock, and just continue to add some water, add some ink, flip them over until I'm happy with the results, and then set them aside to dry. So now I'm just going to use some scraps of fabric to sop up some of that leftover dye on the table, and then I can use those. There's a piece of lace, and I can use those in my journals as well. So now I'm going to use the same process, only this time I'll use some book pages and some vellum, and apply the water and the ink the same way I did with the other papers. I'll just speed it up a bit, put some music on. So now I'm going to ink some vellum. So now I'm just using some other scraps of paper that I've had and sopping up some of that excess ink. Really, you can use any scrap papers that you have laying around. So now I'm going to ink some little frames. I cut up a thrifted photo album, and I'm just going to sop up some of the ink and water left over on the table. Add some more ink. This particular frame I had previously inked, but I wanted to add some more, so I'm just adding some more ink to that. Yeah, so if you're not happy with the results after your paper has dried, just go ahead and go over it again with some more ink until you get the desired results. And again, I'm just going to sop up that excess liquid on the table. This is just a piece of interfacing, I think, from something that I had cut up. And I'm just using that to sop up the excess ink off of the table. Okay, so it's the next day. I did let the papers dry overnight. So let's have a look and see how they turned out. So first we'll look at the cardstock. Again, this is just inexpensive cardstock, white, and we used the acrylic inks. You can see some spots are white. It looks like the ink just didn't hit those areas, so and there's some interesting marks on there. I'm not sure if maybe the bubbles left that. They don't look like bubbles, but and then the other side of the paper that was laying on the table, on the plastic, it also gets a little bit of a different look to it. But I love these colors and the markings. And then we'll have a look here at the brown paper bag. Now I had torn that into smaller pieces. I like doing that because the edges get a nice color to them as well. And they're pretty much the size I would use in a journal, give or take. Sometimes with the brown paper bag, I find all I need is a hit of black on there just to darken it up in spots. And there's some very interesting markings on them, sometimes not so much. And then the book pages. Now these book pages, they had a sheen to them. They were a bit shiny. You can still see some of that even with the ink dye. markings on there, maybe from the table when it was lying on the plastic. My plastic has previous inks on it as well, so sometimes the papers pick the old ink up. And this is the vellum. It has such a wonderful crunchy sound. I just love that. And here are the pieces of paper and the little frames. And these are just the scraps of fabric that I had sopped up the excess dye with. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you were considering dyeing some paper with this technique, that you go ahead and try it. And remember, there's so many wonderful YouTube tutorials out there on dyeing paper and fabric, so I suggest you go and check some of those out. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments below and I'll try and answer them as soon as I can. And if you've stayed to the end of this video, thanks for sticking around, and I'll see you next time.